Sorry for covering the Bible so fast, but I feel like I need to get through First Peter and John before I decide that I'm officially a Christian. Because, like, how can you define yourself as a Christian? You accept one of the Gospels and you follow First Peter. I finished First Peter and I'm down to accept it. First Peter was written to where I put my face right here, this part of Turkey. That's where the churches were. You see Jerusalem down at the bottom right. So there's Lebanon, Jerusalem, like at the bottom corner, and then there's Egypt, where Alexandria is down there. Paul was writing to the church in Corinth over here, which is where Greece is, and that's like where Zeus came from. So, like, when Paul was writing and talking about is Zeus, would the church in Corinth be like, Zeus came back? Or Zeus came as a human and died? Like, I'm confused by that. Yes, they would. And would they know that Apollo is the one writing to him? Clearly, in verse 5 here, they're talking about Apollos and being like, how are you saying, you're Apollo, like you're the son of Jupiter, the one who brings the plague, the one who was against Greece, yeah, during the Trojan War. Well, actually, during the Trojan War, that would be against Athens because there was no Greece. Like, there were city states. Like, back in the day, they didn't have countries. They had cities that were like countries. So in First Peter, we see Paul get corrected, like, subtly. Like, Peter's writing to the churches, and he's like, how we address people matters. Like, titles matter. Like, how I say that. Like, when Priscilla's name is in front of Aquila, it's for a reason. I'm trying to say something about the women, and clearly, like, they took Paul aside and explained the way of God more accurately, even though Paul says that he is equal to Peter as far as apostles go. Clearly, during the First Jerusalem Council, Paul's got to go to James and Peter and, like, go, hey guys, can I circumcise him? Apollos is gay. That's why if I didn't mention that yet. All right, so let's go do First Peter. Paul was obsessed with everyone's dick. He liked them circumcised. Barnabas didn't care. All right, chapter 4. Therefore, since Christ has suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. All right, so I really can't help it. I have to talk about karma again. So in the Hindu tradition, what is karma? Karma is right action. Americans think of karma as, like, if you're nice, then something good will happen to you. It's just the universe is nice to you. Like, in Hinduism, like, karma is, like, your actions are right, and so, like, they can result in something good generally. So, like, in the Christian tradition, like, right action, for at least for God, is, like, well, or for Isus was to suffer, and it was to choose suffering. And so, like, right action generally will relieve suffering or will cause less suffering for yourself. But if you are a person that is like Isus, then you're willing to suffer more for the whole, and therefore karma is suffering. And so, like, in the Buddhist tradition, we don't want to suffer. We don't necessarily want to choose suffering. We want to overcome suffering. And a lot of that's, like, through Stoicism, which is very, very, very Peter. But it's also through, I mean, we just don't want to suffer. It's not like we're trying to suffer. Christianity is a call to suffer, so the karma of Christianity is suffering, but it doesn't mean that you have to always suffer. But, like, when the time of Christ is here, which Christ is the Messiah, Isus was the name, and then Christ is it. That's why I say Jesus the Christ. He's the Messiah. All right, so let's do 3. For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousals, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. And in all this, they are surprised that you do not run into the same excess dissipation, and they malign you, but they shall give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For the gospel has for this purpose been preached even to those who are dead, that though they are judged in the flesh as men, they live in the spirit according to the will of God. The end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be of sound judgment and sober purpose for the purpose of prayer, or and sober spirit for the purpose of prayer. All right, I looked up prayer, and it's prosushi, it's prosuki, and it can also mean worship, and it's something about a chapel. By implication, it's oratory, so it's out loud. So it sounds like to me that like when I think about prayer, this is the first time I've ever analyzed the word. I think of like sutures in the English language, like if you get sutures, like you that's what you use to like heal a wound, to like if a wound is bleeding, you need sutures. Like a doctor will always say, "Give me the sutures." It's a way of like stopping the bleeding. So like worshiping God is a way of stopping the bleeding of that religion that desperately needs someone to save them from Paul. Above all, keep fervent in your love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without complaint. Love is what keeps the church together, even though there's some bull going on. Like, it is that critical to the Christian religion. Like, that is a nightmare being on Donald Trump's side. As each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another and good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Whoever speaks, let him speak, as it were, the utterances of God. Whoever serves, let him do so as by the strength which God supplies, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belongs the glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. I didn't look it up, but Paul would in Paul it'd be spiritual gifts, which are like the gifts of prophecy and gift of healing and crap like that. I don't think like this is like spiritual gifts. I think this is like actual gifts, like talents. I think the love of one another is the sutures that keeps the church together. Also, like that, the church is so ruined right now. All right, verse 12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange things were happening to you. But to the degree that you share the sufferings of Christ, keep on rejoicing, so that also at the revelation of his glory you may rejoice with exultation. Yeah, like my life has gotten that bad. Like, you have to be ready for it, and Peter can get you ready. If you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed because of the Spirit of glory and God, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. By no means let any of you suffer as a murderer or thief or evildoer or a troublesome meddler. But if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not feel ashamed, but in that name let him glorify God. When you're doing a movement like that, you have to be ready to like be embarrassed and to suffer like as a Christian. I feel like I've suffered as a Christian. Verse 17, for it is time for judgment to begin with the household of God, and if it begins with us first, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if it is with difficulty that the righteous is saved, what will become of the godless man and the sinner? Once again, that's quoting the Hebrew Bible. That's why the text is like that. Therefore, let those also who suffer according to the will of God entrust their souls to a faithful Creator in doing what is right. So, like, once again, like when it's talking about like we can trust a faithful Creator in doing what's right, like we can trust the justice of God. Like we can trust that, like, if we're from the Greek tradition and we believe that might makes right, that like what is justice is like strength. Like the strongest person decides what is justice. Like, we can trust that the strongest person is Isus, and that like that guy is willing to suffer for us, and he cares about us, and he's the person you want to make decisions for you in a bad decision in a bad situation. So sin makes you miss a mark. It makes you like miss like the heart of God, and good and karma, which is right action, is the opposite. Like, it is like behaving in a way that like gets you closer to God. It gets you closer to understanding the mind of God. I think that like what's important to understand about me is like the reason I can understand the Bible so well is because all I ever try to figure out is how to be like Jesus. And I was that serious about it for that long. Like, it was my obsession. Like, how can I be like that guy? And like, until you understand the way that guy is, like, you don't get how to like be brave. Like, that is a brave person. That guy is crazy. You're about to see John again coming up, and like that guy is a brave person.